No. Got a spirit level there. Okay, so guys, today we're going to talk about one of my favourite things to talk about in philosophy. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. It's metaethics, and we will get into that in a moment in what it means and what the implications of it are. But for now, I'm going to start with a brief discussion about this, and then we'll try if we can recall what we talked about last lesson. So firstly, I've got ethics is founded in metaphysics. So this is a proposition I'm making. Now, metaphysics is more fundamental, and the reason I'm saying that is it's because the way that the universe is structured, the way that the world is going to dictate how we act. Okay? So the way that the universe is going to dictate how we act, and it's going to dictate all of our ethical theory. And so for that reason, I'm saying ethics is founded in or is grounded in metaphysics. It relies on metaphysical assumptions about the world and the universe and the way things are. All right, any comments about it? Any questions? Okay, so I'll be coming back to this to say where it fits in, but for now it's just to say metaphysics is more fundamental. Our ethics stems from our understanding of metaphysics. All right, last time we talked about two ethical frameworks, but before that we also had a bit of an introduction to ethics. And I just said ethics, we can use the word morality synonymously with it, right? Ethics and morality, we sort of use them to mean the same thing. And I said it's about right action. And I divided it into 3 subtopics. Can we remember what they are within ethics? There's 3 subtopics.
Teleological, is that right?
Teleological was one of the frameworks. Very good. So teleological ethics, good recall. So I said ethics is composed of 3 fields. We had ethical frameworks. All right, and so one of those frameworks we looked at was teleological, wasn't it? Because it was about the consequences. It was about the end. Very good. What was the other one that we looked at? Deontological. Very good. And so we will compare them, okay? Teleological, the end result. Deontological, the act itself. So they were ethical frameworks, okay? We're going to look at others, but for now we'll stop there because they're both sort of really simple ones. But there were 2 other words that I described when we're looking at ethics. Nick?
Was it utilitarian?
Yes, utilitarianism is the same as teleological framework. Yep. Good recalling of that word. Harry?
One is metaethics.
Metaethics, very good. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to discuss what that means in a moment. And then the last one,
Applied ethics.
Applied ethics, very good. Which is where we take the ethical frameworks and we apply them to all manner of ethical situations we're confronted with. Applied ethics. So there's 3 fields of ethics, right? There's the frameworks, we've discussed already. There's the question of metaethics, which is fundamental to any discussion in ethics. And there's the question of applied ethics. How do we take those frameworks and apply them? Very good. So what we're looking at within metaethics is we're going to create a dichotomy. We're going to create a dichotomy between 2 things. What we call moral realism and moral anti-realism. Okay. Moral realism. This says morality is objective. All right? That moral statements have truth value. So let's spin this around. Let's come up with a list of things that are objective and subjective. All right, let's make a distinction there. Objective, subjective. Let's just start with the distinction here. Okay. Things that are objective mean that it's true regardless of your opinion. All right. Another way to think of it is it's a fact. All right. Things that are subjective, they're true. They depend on the subject. They are an opinion. All right. So let's help me sort out this list. Chocolate is the best flavour of ice cream.
Subjective.
Subjective, okay? It depends on who's saying it. People disagree, right? Choc is best flavour.
It's right, but it's subjective.
All right. 2 plus 2 is 4.
Objective.
Okay, an objective statement. All right. Port Power won the 2004 AFL Grand Final. All right, Port Power 104. Port Power are the best AFL team.
Subjective.
Oh.
We tried it.
Port Power is the best. All right. The diameter of a circle is twice its radius.
Subjective.
Objective, yep. So mathematicians, that's the radius. The diameter is the whole way across. So the diameter is equal to twice the radius.
Math.
I'm just going to write math, yeah. Circle. Okay. Murder is wrong.
Subjective.
That's moralism, moralism.
Okay. Murder is wrong. So I'm gonna put it here. Murder is wrong. It's overlapping both. All right. And the reason I'm going to put it here is because that's the question that we're asking today. This is a moral proposition. It's a claim about morality, and we're saying, is it something that's objectively true, that's about the structure of the universe, or is it something that we create and manipulate and choose, and it's just your opinion? All right, that's what's at stake today. Now, I'm going to use this example a fair bit, and Taj, you said it depends on, what did you say? It depends on?
Killing like Hitler or like Bin Laden or something like that.
Excellent, okay, very good. It depends on who you're killing, it depends on the circumstances. So a lot of the time people say, well, what about if you kill someone in self-defense? You know, that doesn't seem like it's, if they're trying to attack you, they're trying to push you off a cliff and you sort of turn around and throw them off. All right, we're going to have a very clear definition of murder. Okay, murder is intentional, so it's done on purpose. Killing, all right, so it ends the life of. Innocent, and then human being. Okay, so we're not going to tack on animal. We're just looking at murder is intentional. It causes the end of life of someone who's innocent. All right, so you can argue in those cases like Hitler or Bin Laden, or the cases like when you're killing someone in self-defense, they're not innocent because they've participated in some evil. Okay, Nick, you got a comment to make?
Just wondering, because I can say it on the board, what's as good a bit than the
Yeah, we'll get to this. Okay, so murder is wrong. Great question. All right, so that's the question we're asking. All right, so we've got a good idea of the difference between things that are objective, things that are subjective. And so moral realism says, like I've got written up here, moral propositions have truth value. All right, that's what moral realism asserts. I'm just going to write the same thing. Moral propositions have truth value. All right. Now, I think this is quite revolutionary, probably not for the Year 12s, but for the Year 11s, because most of you are just going to spend your life as if this is true. And in fact, everyone who doesn't engage in philosophy just assumes it is as well. There is right and wrong ways to behave, and it just so happens to correspond with my conscience. Okay? That everyone assumes this because people act in the world and they assume they did the wrong thing, they did the right thing. We should care about the climate. We shouldn't torture innocent children. Right? All of these statements are moral statements. And we're going a step further. We're saying, is it really objective? Am I really bound by your ideas or just the time period that you happen to be a part of?
Subjectively objective.
So it should be like a pretty fascinating discussion from that regard. Okay, so let's talk about the things that I've got up here. I've got up here a number of what I'm going to say statements. They're all statements, they're like proclamations, right? So circles have 4 corners. It is a proposition, all right? Remember categorical propositions because it's making a statement about the way things are. It's false,
But it's still
circles don't have corners, but it's still a proposition. So you can see this is a proposition and it has truth value. The truth value that this proposition has is that it's false. Okay? 1 plus 1 equals 2, all right? It's a proposition, it's a statement about the way things are, it has truth value, and its truth value is true. This is, okay. Be quiet. It's a statement, but it's not a proposition. I'm not making a statement about the way things are. It's an imperative, it's an order, it's a command. All right, how are you? This is a question. Again, it's not a statement about the way things are, it's a question. All right, this is a nonsense statement, as doesn't mean anything, okay? So it's not a truth statement, it's not a truth act statement. Murder is wrong is a truth act statement, and our question here is it something that's true or is it something that's false? All right, so there's an example of all statements. We have has truth value, doesn't, does have truth value. It's a proposition about the way things are, and we're going to investigate, is it true or not? Okay, so we're going to contrast moral realism with what we call the null hypothesis. So as you engage more in mathematics and science, you're going to come across this word, null hypothesis. This means the default opinion. The default opinion. Now I'm going to say the default opinion is that of moral anti-realism. That moral propositions don't have truth value. And I'm going to take a little sidetrack to explain why that's the case, why that should be the default opinion. All right? Whenever you're constructing a scientific theory or a philosophical theory, you want it to be what's called parsimonious. All right? Parsimonious, or to have great parsimony. Does anyone know what it means? Parsimonious, while I try to spell it. Okay? It means has the least amount of assumptions possible. Okay? So we've got our metaphysics, our understanding of the world, and for it to be parsimonious, for it to be logically consistent, it should have as little assumptions as possible. All right? The less assumptions we have, the better. To make the statement, moral propositions have truth value, is a statement about the way the world is. And so if this is a proposition that you have within your metaphysics, you're adding more things on. It's a positive assertion about the way the world is. All right? Any positive assertions about the way the world are adds more things on. We can think of like, whenever we're having a discussion in ethics, we want to fit as many people around the table as possible so that everyone can have an input. And if people don't agree on the basic assumptions, well, we're not going to reach any conclusions, are we? So some of the assumptions within ethics, all right, within ethics, we'll touch on more of these a bit, are firstly, that there's a real world and it's inhabited by people like me. All right, because if the real world doesn't exist, then ethical questions don't make any sense. If I'm the only person that exists, well, it doesn't really matter what I do. All right, so within ethics, we're going to assume, yep, the real world exists. It's inhabited by people like me. I've got free will. If I don't have free will, what's the point of even asking ethical questions? I'm determined to act a certain way. All right. And then there's more, like those probably are the three most basic. But when we get into applied ethics, we're going to say, do we need to assume that there is a right and wrong way to behave? All right. Okay, so what have we said here so far? We've got moral realism, moral propositions have truth value. Moral anti-realism, I'm saying this is the null hypothesis. This is the default position because it's got less assumptions. That's why. We always want to go for less assumptions. All right? And all it says is the opposite. We're creating that dichotomy again. And dichotomies are great. So it's not a black and white fallacy because it's either one or the other. Moral propositions have truth value or they don't. There's no in between. Okay? Moral propositions have truth value or they don't. And so within this is a field of metaethics called emotivism, which says anytime you make a moral proposition, like murder is wrong, all you're doing is saying, I feel that murder is wrong. I feel that we should care for the climate or we shouldn't torture children or whatever the ethical proposition is. You're just making a statement about the way you feel rather than the way things are. All right? So that's what's at question here. Are moral propositions, do they have truth value, or moral propositions do not have truth value? All right, so do we understand the distinction between the two positions? Mm-hmm. Cool, do not have truth So let's see where people are leaning. Does anyone want to tell us what their thoughts are at this stage? Kim?
As I said earlier, Aiden, I'm definitely more on the moral realism side. That they have to have true value because that's kind of breaks everything down really when you think about it and how everything works. So at least I might have the correct moral opinions, but there is definitely truth value whether we know it or not.
Cool. Yep. So you're saying yep has to be the case.
Yep.
Yep. Does anyone disagree with Campbell? All right, let's see a show of hands. Firstly, I'll allow a bit of a cop out. Who's undecided at this stage? They're just not really sure what camp they're in. All right, so half the people. Who thinks moral realism is true? Yep, who thinks moral anti-realism is true? Cool, so we're pretty divided. Excellent. All right, so this is great. Let's look at some of the arguments and let's see what unfolds. So we're going to start, we've got two arguments in favour of moral realism. We're going to start with that because that's the positive case. They're making the assertion. This has what we call the burden of proof. And then we're going to look at three arguments in favour of moral anti-realism. And we'll discuss problems associated with them and so forth. So remember I talked about before assumptions, metaphysical assumptions. We want to have as little as possible so that we can fit as many people around the table as we can. So first is that there's a real world. The world exists beyond my senses of it's inhabited by people like me. All right, that I have a will and a personal experience and a sense of the world and relationships, and I feel love, and so do you guys. Okay, so do every single one of you and all other 8 billion people on the planet. All right, and I have the capacity to choose what actions I perform. All right. And lastly, we're not entertaining with this question, all right, we're not arguing for or against God's existence. Some people will take moral realism and say, yep, we've proved moral realism is true, therefore God exists. All right, so they go from here to God's existence, and that is an argument that you can entertain. Where for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to be ambivalent about it. We're not going to hold court on that argument as such. Yeah, go for it. So that's moral realism. I said, we're being ambivalent about God. The other thing is, people will look at that and they'll say, I don't believe in God, therefore I don't believe in moral realism. All right. But remember, I'm saying we're trying to be ambivalent about that because that's in the field of metaphysics. Let's leave it there. The reason you shouldn't do that, okay, is because when we have a theory about the world, we want to include all of the data. All right, we include all data because all of the data should inform it. It is really bad science, and you guys will know this if you're doing any science experiments, to go, all right, I've performed my experiment, and this piece of data doesn't fit in with the experiment, so therefore I'll exclude it. It doesn't fit in with my theory about the world, so I'm going to exclude it. We don't do that. We need to include everything and discuss everything. So, okay, let's get into the arguments. So here's the first argument. Can you read it, Angela?
All people have an innate sense of right and wrong, therefore an objective moral code exists.
Very good. Okay, so it's not a syllogism. This is what we call an enthymeme. It's an argument that has an implicit premise. There's a premise that's missing. So, to be charitable, to interpret it using the principle of charitable interpretation, to steelman it, here's how we could express it. So, Jacob, can you read that one for me?
All people have innate sense of right and wrong, therefore an objective moral code exists.
Very good. Yeah, read the next one.
All people have innate senses of right and wrong. This sense of right and wrong is the objective moral code. Therefore, all people have an objective moral code.
Very good. Okay. So remember, with a syllogism, if we can think of an exception to one of these premises, the argument falls apart. That's why we do it, and that's one of the things I've tried to convey in the draft feedback. Syllogism. You reduce an argument to 2 sentences, and then all you have to do is assess the sentencing. Is this a true sentence? All people have an innate sense of right and wrong. Nick's first.
No.
Good. How come?
Because some people, what they think is right and wrong is completely different. Some people kill and steal and whatever, and they think it's right in their opinion, but it's different from what other people think is right.
Okay, so I'm going to say that doesn't, there's going to be an alternative response, but that doesn't work here. I'm not saying they're the same, I'm saying all people have it. Yeah.
I think people, because of the way they're raised, have a sense of right and wrong. But if you just had a baby in like a lab and didn't teach it anything and let it grow up, I don't think it would have that same sense.
Sense of right and wrong. So
Yeah.
it's because we're socially
Yeah,
conditioned.
exactly.
Yeah. So that, again, same response to Nick. I don't think it's a response to any of these premises as such. All I'm asserting is, it might be a response to that one actually. You're saying it's only got it because
There's other people teaching.
Yeah. So we will look at that argument in a moment from a social construction. Right, Campbell, were you before Abbas?
You're going to go about
Abbas?
Sure. I think everyone has a innate sense of right and wrong. For example, if I were to steal, I will know that I'm doing something wrong, but I'll still do it.
Yep.
Because in my mind, I think it's right, but I know internally that's wrong.
Yep.
And if someone found out, I'll be punished for it.
Yep. So you agree with the first premise? Yeah, Bradley?
Could that be like peer pressure, sort of?
Peer pressure to behave according to how everyone else behaves? Yeah, absolutely. That's the social conditioning argument. We'll look at in a moment. But I'm looking really specifically at this. Is it true that all people have an innate sense of right and wrong?
I wouldn't say it's a sense. I think that's the word is misleading.
Yep.
For example, if we were to describe our senses, we have like our eyes, our ears, our mouth. I think necessarily the word sense is actually a bit misleading.
Sure. Yep. So you'd pick on that word and say, I prefer something different. Yep.
Yeah.
Nana?
Some people don't actually have it. It's not in their personality, like psychopaths, for example.
Perfect. That's the word I'm looking for. A psychopath. Do you know anyone?
No.
Not one of your buddies? You don't know any psychopaths? So psychopaths are generally people that lack empathy.
I knew one. Let's not talk about
Psychopath. No, they
Where's the H?
P-S-Y-C-H-O.
There we go.
They can't spell psychopath either.
Psychopath could be one, but also another could be someone with autism.
Yep.
They also may not have a sense of empathy or be able to gauge right or wrong.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, this is really good. So we're pointing out here, we're saying, no, it's not quite true that all people have a sense of right and wrong. There are some that don't. Okay, so because of that, we're able to reject the first premise and the argument falls apart.
With the autism, the way I see it, I call it like they're not having a filter.
Yep.
If you know what I mean. Like they just say what's on their mind and what they see. Where like people who don't have it, they don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, so they still have that sense.
They think it, but they don't say it.
Sure.
Where someone with autism would just
they can
let them know.
That's it, there's not a filter there. Yep, Mena?
Back to the psychopaths and autism, it's probably because they don't have the sense, but they are taught that some of these things, because they're taught to fit in, so they're taught that this is wrong and this is right and this is what you're supposed to do.
Yep, so they're conditioned.
They're conditioned.
Yep, but they don't have that sense. Yep. And so, Vinny might make the argument that all people are like that. Some people just learn better or are more susceptible to the cultural conditioning. Yep. Okay, so what I want to say about this is that I think that's a good objection, all right? But I think the argument can still work. And I'm going to use the example of a blind person.
I was going to say.
Okay? Someone who is blind, what sense are they lacking?
Sight.
They can't see, okay? So someone who is blind cannot see my fabulous purple drink bottle here. Okay. Does that mean the purple drink bottle does not exist?
No.
No, it still exists. It still exists as an ontological object, right? It still has existence in this realm. Okay? So then, by analogy, someone who is a psychopath, what are they lacking?
They can't see the innate sense of right and wrong.
They can't see the innate sense of right and wrong. Does that mean it doesn't exist? No. It just means they're deficient in some aspect of seeing the way things are. Okay, so we can rebut that with the idea of a psychopath, but then we can sort of steel man the argument again by making an argument by analogy.
Is that an argument that can also be used as an argument for God? Because you can't, just because you can't see something doesn't mean that it's there.
I suppose so. Can you make that argument for me? Like,
well, alright, so let's say that there is a God and that no one can see the purple bottle or God, then that would, at that point towards, even if there was a God and we didn't know about it, does that mean that,
yeah. No, that's, let's have a think about it and we'll talk a bit more about it. But so if we do that, if we stick with the blind person and seeing, okay, the reason we're all saying yes, this purple drink bottle exists is because we can see it and touch it and feel it and smell it, and if you want, you can have a lick. All right, you can taste it. But so we can, all of our senses tell us this drink bottle exists, right? And so we're agreeing that it's true. So we're just appealing to the masses. Everyone says it's true, therefore it's true. So that could be, that doesn't guarantee it's true. But we're suggesting because lots of people believe it's true, we've got good inductive evidence to infer that it is true. Okay, so that's the first argument for moral realism, and we can see there's some strength there, a weakness, and then a strong argument by analogy in response. Okay, Harry, can you read it for me?
If moral disputes
Also have any
Efficacy.
then moral language must have an objective meaning. We all act if moral disputes have efficacy. Therefore, we act as if moral language has an objective meaning.
Very good. Okay, so if moral disputes are to have any efficacy, that means if there's any point to a moral discussion, all right? So a moral discussion, a particularly tenuous one, is something like abortion, right? To make this claim, abortion is wrong or abortion is right. For us to have an argument about it, we're assuming there is a right and wrong way to act. Okay, that's what this argument's suggesting. And then it goes on to say, well, we act as if it's true, therefore we act. And that's what I was saying right at the start, is that you rock up to this lesson and your default assumption before I've raised the question is that, yeah, of course there's right and wrong. Right? I'm saying, well, let's have a look. What are the arguments for it? So what do we think about this argument?
Well, it comes down to entirely if moral disputes actually have any efficacy at all, because it says we act as if, but honestly, if we can act as if something's true if it's not. For example, you could convince a group of islanders that they're the only people on the planet, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Just because we act in a way doesn't necessarily allow it to be true.
Good. I think that's a good objection. Yep. I'm gonna make this argument again, but from I like mathematical ways of doing it. Okay, check out this number. 15.
50.
Is anyone here 15? No. We're all at least 16, 17, or 18. I've got a friend called Bob, and he thinks 15 is a prime number. Is Bob correct?
No.
You're saying no. Bob says, let's make the dichotomy again. Bob says a prime number is any number that has a 1 or a 5 in it. All right? A 1 or a 5 in it. And I'm a maths teacher. I'm Dan. I say, nah, Bob. Prime number divisible only by itself and 1. Alright, so I've got the proper definition of a prime number. I'm just going to write prime. Okay? Can we, this is the argument, we have a different idea of what constitutes a prime number. Can we reach an agreement about whether this is a prime number or not? No, there's no way we can agree because he's got a completely different idea to what it is, and so do I. Alright? Similarly, with all moral discussions, if we have completely different ideas of what morality is, of what right action is, there's no way, Nick, that we can reach a common understanding. All right. So this one's saying, if we're going to have a discussion about any issue, be it abortion or climate or any moral issue, we need to have a common understanding. Okay? We need to have some common frame to build from. Even with something like abortion, right? Let's look at that. You might say, like, abortion, that they're too far apart. They don't value anything. Like, so the dichotomy there, we've got the pro-choice, and we've got, what's the other? Pro-life. Okay, so here we go. What does the pro-choice side value?
Freedom.
That's what he said. Freedom? Yeah, the freedom of choice. And so fundamentally, they've got a value of the life of the mother, right? Life of the mother, right? They're valuing the life of the mother. What about this pro-life side? What do they value?
The life of the child.
What is fundamental that they both value? Life. Life is common to both, and so they can have a discussion about it. The only way you can have a moral discussion is if there's some value in common, all right? And we act as if it is, so it's saying that there is. Okay, so we've looked at two arguments in favour of moral realism. Let's look at some moral anti-realism. All right, so this is where we're saying, no, it's moral propositions do not have truth value. All right, Bradley, can you have a read?
All morality is socially constructed. All too socially constructed is relative. Therefore, all morality is relative.
Relative, very good.
Relative.
And TWA, that which is. Okay,
so
yeah, that's all fine.
I thought you spelled it wrong.
Yeah, I'd be more inclined to believe that too. Okay, all morality is socially constructed. Everything that's socially constructed is relative. Okay. So, can anyone take issues with this argument?
Just are you taking into account that all morality is good, so bad morality and good? So you're saying that they're all relative, basically?
Yeah, I'm not making a distinction between good and bad, just all
Yeah.
moral senses are socially constructed. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's my first problem, is just the first premise in general, right? All morality is socially constructed is an assumption, right off the bat.
Begging the question against the opposite case.
Exactly. So if we assume that that's true, then it follows through, but that's the assumption in the first place. It's contested itself.
Very good. Yep. Good objection. Hey?
Couldn't you say, like, science is socially constructed?
Yeah, go on.
And then saying all that is socially constructed is relative, then you can say, like, a study, what the results of the study is relative. Like, if they did a math equation, it's relative, like
Perfect.
the answer.
Okay, really, really good. All right, so that's going to be our strongest objection is going to be the premise 2. So again, I love the appeal to mathematics that we're taking. All right, so let's see if we can. What example should I use? Let's use something like index laws. Okay, so if you have a times a squared, right? If you have a times a times a to the power of 3. All right. In fact, if you have a times a times a times a, and you do that n times, it's going to be a to the power of n. Okay. This is something that you are socially constructed into believing. Even I was taught this back in year 8, year 9. All right, it's not something I've gone out and investigated and proved myself. I'm told these are the rules and they seem to work, and I even teach it. Okay, this is something I've been socially constructed into believing. All right. The question then remains: is it something that's just true? All right. Let's contrast it with something like the rules of AFL. Okay, the rules of AFL. So here we have rules of mathematics. All right, I've got some index laws. Here I've got the rules of AFL. These are subjective. They're man-made. We can change them. they change the AFL rules all the time. The new one, like what's the latest? Everyone has to start inside the 50-metre arc.
Yep.
All right. So the rules of AFL are something that you can change. And these are socially conditioned into us, aren't they? We're taught the rules of AFL. They're something that's socially conditioned and they're subjective because we can change it. Here's something that's socially conditioned, but I would make the argument it's not subjective because you can't just change it. You can't just make it up. Like even something like Pythagoras' theorem, right? It's not something you can change.
Because the whole system breaks down otherwise.
The whole system breaks. This is something that's about the way the universe is. It's something that we're socially constructed into believing. And so you make the argument by analogy. You say, well, yeah, you're socially constructed into behaving in a moral way because that's the way the universe is. Okay? So that's our first argument. Any other comments there? All right, second one. So this is the one, Nick, you raised this objection. Can you have a read of that for us?
All cultural values differ from one culture to another. Therefore, moral rightness differs from one culture to another.
Very good. Can we provide an example? Like, what's some cultures that have had different values over time? Harry?
Murder of, the slaughter of cows.
Slaughter of cows? Yep. So like in India?
In India,
Pakistan.
cows are considered a higher being.
Yep.
So they're not allowed to kill or eat cows.
Yep.
Whereas in many Western cultures and a lot of other cultures, cows and steak is it's just a meal.
Really good example. Really good example. Yep.
With the cows, don't they think it's like family members who have passed or reincarnated? Yeah,
I think that's right. Yep.
Like capital punishment.
Very good. Yep. So go on, tell us about that.
Like in America, in some states, isn't it still legal?
Yep.
Whereas most countries don't allow it.
Very good. Yep. The majority of the Western world doesn't, but it is still legal in parts of the states. Yep. So capital punishment, that means like killing someone after they've committed a crime. Yep. Nick, another one.
Public displays of affection.
PDA. Yep. So where's it frowned upon? Here. Say again.
Lots of different
places.
Usually Eastern countries.
Eastern countries. Yep. Yep. Public displays of affection. All right. How about the big S word?
Slavery.
Slavery.
Yeah, there's still countries that practice it.
Yeah, there's still countries that practice slavery. All right. And we don't even need to refer to now. We can talk about throughout all of history.
Yeah.
All right. Like cultures don't just exist now. Culture has shifted and changes throughout all of history. So there are cultures in the past that have practiced slavery. Think back to ancient cultures. There's some horrible things that ancient cultures have done. Who can tell me one? All right. What did the Aztecs do?
Isn't there blood sacrifice to their slaves and stuff like that?
Yeah, have you guys heard that? They had those massive temples, they take people to the top.
Roll the heart down the stairs afterwards. Yeah.
Why did they do that?
Please the sun god.
Please the sun
To
god.
please the sun god. They literally thought that they were staving off the apocalypse, that if they didn't perform these sacrifices, the end of the world was going to happen. Yeah, Nick? Another one? Cannibalism? Yeah, look, these are all great. Cannibalism. You know, there are some cultures where they think,
Fiji. Sorry.
Can I tell you about? I don't know. It's pretty horrific. I don't know if I should tell you.
No, tell us.
Tell you?
Just do it.
No, you
Okay, all right. I'm going to describe it in the most politically correct way I can. There's a culture in Papua New Guinea, and they take young boys. All right. Now they believe that semen is the life force. Okay. And so when the boys are young, their job is to ingest as much semen as possible to take on as much life force as, that's just mind-boggling to us sitting here all right? But to them, that's something that's part of their culture. All right? Who are you to say otherwise, this argument's saying? Who are you to judge?
In Fiji, they believe that if you ate the brain of someone else, you would gain all their intelligence.
All their intelligence, yeah.
Vlad the Impaler, how he used to impale people and his followers just for their entertainment.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep, entertainment.
I believe that Vlad the Impaler once he got all of the poor people within his town.
Yeah.
And just burn the entire building.
Yeah,
And then,
for entertainment.
yeah, basically for entertainment. First he fed them food, and then said, "Would you like all your problems to go away?" And he basically answered their wish by burning them to death.
Yeah. So, like, we started pretty tame, and then we just got. Bradley, you got.
Just with the cannibal, there's one.
Yeah.
Me and Mum were watching a documentary. I can't remember where it is, but there's this like culture where like dead people, they like cook them and eat them.
Yep.
And like eat their flesh and stuff, and they like smoke a lot of marijuana.
Yep, like they, it might be the Inuits, they eat their grandparents. They once their grandparents die, they eat them. You know,
They also do
take on their family
with
ancestors.
their body parts and
Yep.
swords.
Yep.
If you can imagine.
I don't know, I think it's like one of the Asian countries where like all the dead people, they keep them alive, like they treat them as if they were alive, they feed them, they bathe them, they clothe them and like that. As
Yep.
if, like they're
Pretend they're still alive.
Yeah.
No, marriage.
Marriage as well. Yep, marriage is definitely something that's changes from culture to culture. Yep. Okay, so look, that's an interesting discussion. Is you can come up with some really absurd examples about how cultures differ. All right. Now again, this is what we call an enthymeme because it's got an implicit assumption. All right. So remember, it's not expressed as a syllogism. So again, we'll still man it. We express it. We look what's the missing syllogism there. All cultural values differ from one culture to another. Therefore, moral rightness is obedience to cultural values. That for you to act in a morally right way, that means you are obedient to what your culture values. Okay? Therefore, moral rightness differs from one culture to another. And you've got the objection already.
Massive objection. Nazi Germany, hiding Jews in your basement, right?
Yep.
If you're in that culture, that was wrong, big no-no. In other cultures, that was, that might be considered objectively the right thing to do. Nearly everyone agrees that would have been the right thing to do, right?
Yep.
But in Nazi Germany, that was a massive no-no. So how can you say that that's moral rightness?
Perfect. Okay, so that's the big objection to premise 2, isn't it? So you see, once we move from a enthymeme to a syllogism, then we can clearly see what's the assumption going on here, and lots of people will take issue with that. All right, we're very ready to look at the Papua New Guineans or the cannibals and to judge that, or slavery, to judge that very harshly. All right, but you either don't judge or you suppose our values are better because our values are right. All right, you suppose there is an objective measure. All right, let's look at the last one. Okay, another enthymeme. Chelsea, can you read it for me?
People have different opinions about what is right and what is wrong. Therefore, there is no truth. What is right and wrong.
Is this a good argument?
No, it's
this is a terrible argument. Okay, why is this a terrible argument? Nick?
Because opinion does not equal truth.
Very good, all right. People have different ideas about whether the world is round or flat. Therefore, there's no truth about it.
The world just isn't.
Okay, so a really interesting discussion, right, Taj? Almost done. So that's my last slide. But let's look back up here at the arguments we've looked at. Moral realism says, yes, moral propositions have truth value, morality is objective. Moral anti-realism says, no, it's not. It's something that's socially conditioned, it's constructed, it's just your opinion. So the arguments we looked at, for moral realism, we said everyone has this sense, therefore it's something that exists. The second argument said, we at least act as if it's true, and from there, by extension, therefore it is a property of the universe. All right. Or for the other case, for the flip of the coin, we talked about social construction. That which is socially constructed is relative. We can think of the mathematical objections. Okay, you're socially constructed into the rules of prime numbers and the rules of Pythagoras theorem, index laws, and so forth. So that doesn't mean, just because something's socially constructed doesn't mean it's relative. Lots of examples there of cultural values differing. But again, the objection being, well, just because they differ doesn't mean they're wrong, right or wrong. All right? And even then, I think you can make the case as well, all right? Even then, remember I said, well, if we look at these guys, the cannibals and Aztecs and even slavery, all of them, remember I said, for us to have an ethical discussion, we need to have some common underlying framework. Aztecs, why are they making sacrifices? To keep the sons, to keep everyone alive. Why are the cannibals in? To keep themselves alive. To take it. It's all about they have some fundamental underlying value, whether it be their life or their own existence and so forth. So really good. Hopefully you found that interesting. Does anyone feel that they're swaying one more way or the other?
No, I'm staying the same place.
Yep, same place. You're convinced moral realism. What's that, Jake?
I'm changing a bit.
Yep. Where you feel you're sitting?
I'm more sitting towards anti-realism.
Yeah, and what's convinced you of that?
Just everything's a preference.
Yep.
Everything is subjective.
Yep.
Everything is subjective.
Yep. Even the mathematics?
Sometimes.
Yep. Yep. Very good. Okay, so I'll stop there. So hopefully all of us have seen our draft feedback. All right, so remember we want to transition from that sort of low resolution to something high resolution. All right, so start making implementing some of those changes. I'll give you that half hour now.